you see a person falling without their shoe and like their leg's been torn off, so all the blood's like streaming up. And then you get a little glimpse of the alien as it's falling as well. And then once they...
Hello, and welcome to HAZMAT, the only show that can stop time.
Oh, you already... Sorry, you already did. You fucked it.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Harry.
And this is the monthly thing, the part of the show where we talk about every film or series we watched in the last month, whether we recommend them, what we thought about them, and how we felt watching them.
Oh, because it was October, probably a little spooky,
A little frightened,
a little eeky,
a little
creepy.
Ooh. As usual, we may get into some spoilery territory, so we'll recommend up front, and then you can decide whether or not you want to hear us talk about these films, and I hope you do, because that's kind of what the video is. We're not going to do much else.
We might do some other things.
I have learned how to juggle recently. I could do a bit of that, maybe.
I was thinking maybe like chess. If we do like a chess game and it'll like be
ongoing,
so like people don't get bored. It's like I'm thinking like the whole Subway Surfers thing, where people don't like lose attention, but a bit more class.
And it's a bit more physical. I don't have to do any editing. We can just play a game of chess in the middle.
It's just there.
Perfect. So we'll do that for you if you get bored of us talking about films. First up, Joker, Folie à Deux.
First up, the Joker, baby.
The Joker, baby.
The Joker, baby.
He's back. Not a recommend from me.
No. And from the way people have been talking about it, as if it's the worst movie of it come out, the worst movie of the month, the worst thing they've seen recently. I don't think it is, but I would easily say it's the most disappointing movie of this year.
Right, yeah, I agree. We both sort of thought it wasn't as crazy bad as people were, like, hyping it up. What's the opposite of hyping?
Oh, yeah. God.
Shit talking, like...
Trashing,
yeah.
Denouncing. People were
denouncing this film.
People were stripping this film of its titles and its rights to take the throne, its sort of right of ascension. It's all gone.
It's all gone now.
It's all gone.
And all we've got left is a bunch of cigarettes and some Frank Sinatra songs.
Which ain't so bad. Like
on paper, that sounds fine.
That's all right. That's kind of just what his shtick was.
But when you add everything else in this film as well, not a great soup. Yeah, like we say, it wasn't as crazy, laughably bad as people were saying, but still not great. It doesn't at all live up to its predecessor. A bit of a mess, I thought. Tonally a bit of a mess.
This movie opens really, really strongly and then just goes downhill from there. As soon as it turns to live action...
I was about to say, I like the prison stuff. You're going even further.
Oh, yeah, no, like the animated sequence at the beginning.
Yeah.
Great bit of fun.
Tell you what, the logos...
everything after that.
The logos at the start, absolutely, I loved it.
You know what, when I came in and all the trailers were on and I was getting excited, I love that.
I was interested in that. Anything after that?
Yeah, like listening to the radio on the drive to the cinema was pretty good.
You know what? When I woke up that morning, I had a lovely bowl of cereal, and that really put me up for the day. I loved that. Everything after that was shite. Yeah, I mean, where do we even start? Like, it tries to do the realism and grittiness of the first one, which the first one managed to capture quite well. But then it adds, in this one, for some reason, they decided to go a musical route. It was like a jukebox musical. It's all like songs. It's not original.
Yeah.
As far as I know, there wasn't any original songs in there.
It doesn't fully kind of commit to being a musical, though. There's some sort of aspect of musical in that some of it is like looks like a performance and some of it is there's a bit of a routine, but it should have fully committed to being a proper choreographed, larger than life sequence for all of the musical numbers, and maybe even do some original stuff, like not just taking the jukebox tracks, maybe put some original music in there. I feel like it wasn't gonna please anyone, because the people that didn't want it to be a musical were upset that they were singing, and then the people that were all into the idea of it being a musical just kind of walked away like, oh, they didn't really make it a musical.
It wasn't enough. And like I say, I think some original songs would have maybe like boosted it a little bit and not make it seem so kind of honed in. That's not phoned in. That's what I missed out the P. Sorry, everyone.
Sorry.
In my defense, it sounds like an F. So yeah, it just ends up as this like weird mesh of dark, gritty, like prison / courtroom drama with like some sequences where like half of them are in his head and sometimes they are just singing out loud. I think it was kind of hard to tell. They didn't really commit one way or the other there. If they were going to do like all these massive, fantastical choreographed numbers, sure, it makes sense to have it in his head. He's a bit of a psycho. He's always in his own head a lot. That would make a lot of sense. But then it's just like, oh, sometimes they are just like singing at each other, I think, in the street. Like, because they did, like, when they
have characters mention it, saying that, like, you're the ones that were singing during the
That's
the
what I was about to
riot
say. Like, when they're breaking out and they're, like, apparently actually singing there.
They are actually singing during that sequence, but it's something that, as a tool, could have been used quite well to kind of, just to denote either the contrast between the two personalities, because that's kind of what the movie centers around a lot, is the conflicting, contrasting personalities of Arthur Fleck and the Joker. That's what the whole trial is about whether the Joker is its own, like, succinct personality, and whether he is a sick person who can't control what the Joker's doing, or whether it's all him. Or, like, at the very least, you introduce Harley Quinn. Why not have her do the musical numbers, and then just keep Joker as the grounded...
Right.
And then you've got the kind of the contrast between them.
But instead we had to make Joaquin Phoenix kind of stutter through these Frank Sinatra songs and heavily auto-tune his voice as well.
As good as a performer as Joaquin Phoenix is, I don't think singing these kind of numbers...
It's not quite in his wheelhouse, which is fine. He's very good at a lot of other things. And to be fair, his performance as Joker here was, like, fine. It was, like, still a good Joker, I thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just that it just... Yeah, tonally it's kind of the main thing for me, is it just felt like it didn't know what it was doing the whole time.
I think, yeah, that third act in particular is where it really gets kind of...
Yeah, it just goes a bit
very messy. We mentioned how, because they're doing like this kind of grounded, gritty, realistic portrayal, but they don't stick to their own logic in the fact that there's a lot of things that are really nonsensical and don't make a lot of sense in that final act. I think the big one to talk about is that whole courtroom sequence that it keeps jumping back and forth between. If you're trying to do a realistic courtroom depiction of a trial that's actually going on, if the trial centers around whether or not a person is mentally sound and whether they should be held accountable for their crimes, or whether they are genuinely insane and can't be held accountable for their actions, why would you allow them to represent themselves in court?
Yeah, it's such a weird plot point, and I'm not usually one to be like, oh, well, that's not very realistic, blah blah blah, because like sometimes films are films, they have to do whatever they have to do, but that is just like so so stupid, and clearly just an excuse to have him strut around the court in his makeup and his suit. You can tell sometimes watching a film when they're already thinking about the marketing and the trailers.
Yeah.
Like, because they're like, oh, if we get some shots of him in strutting around the courtroom as a lawyer in his Joker makeup, like, we're gonna make the big bucks.
I think that would have been good, and a good idea if they had committed to it from the beginning. Not just horned in at the last act, at the last moment. If it had been centered mostly around the trial from the beginning of the movie, and he was already like opting to represent himself, but maybe tweak what the trial was about and how much it is about how mentally sound he is. But if he wanted to represent himself, just find a way to write that, and then it could have just been a whole movie of Joaquin Phoenix acting and doing wacky shenanigans in the courtroom, and it probably would have been more enjoyable.
And we probably could have shaved off about an hour of meat here. That's not an hour of
an hour of fat. Trim the fat.
Trim the fat. Trim the meat.
Yeah, I want
cut the slabs of meat off.
That's probably where they made the mistake in the movie. It was like no meat, all fat.
Yeah, no meat, all fat.
We trimmed the wrong bit. We trimmed it all correctly.
Yeah,
we threw the wrong bit out.
Quite frankly, I was quite bored during this. I think at certain points, I just wanted to leave. I was like, I don't care what happens next. Some bits were kind of interesting here and there, but I think it was way too long. This was clearly just, they had a bunch of fucking ideas, and they tried to kind of cram a whole lot.
They tried to do everything in one go. And even when like the movie's kind of marketed about like the big changes, that now we've got a second one, we've got Harley Quinn as well, and it's kind of marketed as is going to be around their kind of unhinged relationship, I just didn't care. There was no point where I was like, I care about like how these two characters are interacting with each other and their relationship. I don't care.
It didn't feel like it went anywhere satisfying or developed in any sort of... It was very sort of sudden, and then, I don't know, it just sort of peters out towards the end of the film.
This will be the big spoiler talk, I guess, is the ending. Because the ending's been very, like... I think it's been slept on in how much people... I do not see people talking about the ending much at all.
Right, yeah. I think probably half people didn't make it to the end.
Probably just were like, oh yeah, I'm done. Obviously, here's the big spoiler for people that still care somewhat about Joker 2. Joker dies at the end. Fucking just, that's it, he's dead.
Yeah.
The end. See ya, bye.
By the way, he's gone, so I guess we're not doing a third.
It's either that or like it's the concept of whether that was Joker to begin with.
Right. Or is the Joker kind of a title?
Yeah, because the way the movie ends is he gets stabbed in prison by another inmate who's sort of constantly in the background, who gets focused on a little bit.
Right, yeah. It's sort of hinted at.
And then the last shot shows him sort of bleeding out on the floor, and then the guy in the background starts laughing, and then it looks like he's like using the shiv to then carve into his face, which would be like the Joker smile scars thing.
So we're saying Joker is kind of a moniker or like a state of mind,
or is that
is
that the Joker? And like you're saying that the backstory of the Joker took inspiration from another person, but
right,
they never really commit to a full idea. Like the idea of in this particular world that the Joker isn't a single entity and is, like you said, an idea. It's an idea because obviously you had the whole thing with the people in the clown masks and all the rioting on the streets and how a lot of people got behind him. The idea of the Joker being just a belief and anyone can be the Joker. It's the ending of Into the Spider-Verse, you know, where it's like anyone can wear the mask, but it's like anyone can be the Joker.
So I guess we're not getting Folie à Trois.
We're not getting Joker 3's company.
Joker, but he is the 3.
Yeah.
Bit of a weird one.
Like we said, it's not good enough to recommend. We didn't hate it as much as we thought. It's just very...
No, but I definitely didn't enjoy it either.
No, it's very... Just
I was just kind of, right, okay, this is happening.
We saw this and now we'll forget about it.
Yeah.
It falls very much...
To be fair, I haven't thought about it that much since we watched it.
He's having a sip.
It's the classic sip break. This is what the fans love. The sip break. Next up, The Apprentice.
Dun 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 dun. Is
that also the theme tune for the
American? Same song.
I hope so. No, I think the American one is it's Trump! It's Donald Trump and he sits in his tower and he judges you. It's like a pop-punk thing. Yeah. You know what? This is a recommend from me.
Yeah, I liked this. I didn't like the subject.
We don't like the subject. Let us make it clear.
Let me be clear.
Let me be clear. Yeah, I just thought it was a quite surprisingly well done biopic of this horrible man.
Yeah, it doesn't really pull any punches.
Oh, it's definitely a critical. I was kind of scared it was going to be a bit like on the fence about things and a bit too objective, but no, it took its stance and it ran with it.
And really, it is objective in a way because a lot of the things that happen in this movie, if you read them, you'd think that is something that is fictionalized for like a book or a movie to make someone sound like an awful
super
person.
Villain.
That is a villain origin story.
You just listed villain traits.
Oh no, this is actually documented as having happened.
A man who has ruled over the United States of America did all this shit in the past. Interestingly played by Sebastian Stan. Odd choice here, but again, surprisingly good. There were certain shots where he really looked and sounded like Trump.
I'd say, flashes of brilliance is how I describe it. I think for the most part of this movie, I was very aware that I was watching Sebastian Stan.
Yeah.
But like you said, certain parts of it, certain shots...
I think it's more towards the end.
That's the spitting image
right,
of a young Trump.
It's when he gets like a bit older, I found. He starts getting a bit of fat around his face and stuff. I don't know if it was just they were using more prosthetics or something, but he was better with the mannerisms. I think some of the accent occasionally he didn't quite nail down, but I think the mannerisms and sort of tone, really good, Jeremy Strong, however, incredible performance as Roy Cohn, this seedy lawyer guy that is essentially responsible for like the reason Trump is the way he is, I guess.
He's the emperor of this movie.
Created a monster. Yeah.
I think it's one of the more interesting kind of interpretations or descriptions I've seen in this movie is that it's a weird take on the story of Frankenstein.
Oh right,
you've got the doctor creating the monster, but in this version, the monster is the monster and not the victim.
Right.
The doctor's the victim.
Yeah. I think what it managed to capture really well was how fucking weird he is. He's just very awkward and strange.
Very socially awkward.
Yeah.
And, terrible, cannot read a room, save his own life.
I think we obviously all think of him as this like very powerful man, because he's become that. But with that, you think of him as this like charismatic, maybe it's not the right word, but you know, confident, like. But no, he's underneath it all. It's like a facade. He's just this like really awkward, bumbling, like fucking weirdo, and it's just kind of copying things from other people around him and kind of replicating it in his own way.
It's one of the more fun things to do, I think, is if you look at footage from like a Trump rally, look at the people in the crowd, the way they're reacting, and then take Trump in a more objective environment and just compare the reactions to the things he's saying.
Right, yeah, he's got his people that follow him, but you put him in just like a random bar in New York and everyone's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?
What the fuck are you talking about? You citrus looking motherfucker. It's weird how this movie kind of documents the rise of Trump, but it's weird how every time Roy Cohn is on screen, he's a scene stealer.
Oh yeah,
his story is much more interesting to watch and play out throughout this movie than Trump's is.
Definitely, yeah. It almost feels like it should have been his biopic. Trump was just in it. But obviously, I mean, I'll admit I didn't really know who he was, like the lawyer.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of him before. So, yeah, sort of going in blind in that sense. But I think Jeremy Strong, yeah, really hit it out of the park with this. Fully committed to this sort of very...
sort of stoic and cold and... he's gone.
Stoic, cold, determined,
calculated,
yes. Almost sociopathic at times. But then towards the end, you see flashes of disappointment, emotion, sadness. Like you say,
yeah, that's like a credit to his performance. I think that we see throughout the movie that he is just as much of a monster as Trump is.
Yeah.
That he's willing to go to any length to get what he wants, and he will undercut people. He'll break the rules. He'll commit any crime he wants, like as long as he can get away with it. And he is this awful person, but then you start to feel somewhat sympathetic towards him towards the end, because it's like this guy that he's nurtured and fostered as his successor is now like wants nothing to do with him.
Right, yeah. It almost kind of switches halfway through, where, because at the beginning you sort of almost feel for Trump very occasionally when you see him, just when he's sort of on his own awkwardly in the bar or whatever, or he's left alone at a party and he's just sort of looking a bit lost. You're like, oh, like damn, back in the day he was kind of just like a lost kid that was kind of living in the shadow of his father and his father's business, and then you see him transform into who we all know and love today. And then the Ray starts to go downhill, and then you start feeling for him, because I was not only scared that it was going to be too objective and on the fence, I was scared that it was going to almost make us feel sorry or feel for Trump and have like more backstory. It hints at kind of doing that at the start, and then manages to flip into almost feeling sympathy for Ray, and then what he's going for. Roy, sorry. It's the fucking Glenn Powell all over again.
Oh god.
And I've lost my train of thought. So thank you. He's bailing.
It's done. It's over. Cut the feed.
No, that was my point. You feel bad for feeling bad for them. It's an interesting. It plays that balance. It walks that line so well. This film, I thought,
it's a sign of a good film. It's like when you can pull out those kind of stacked emotions. I think it was similar to a little bit to The Zone of Interest, where you see the struggles that family are going through, and it almost makes you feel bad for them, but then you're like,
you have to keep reminding yourself, hang on.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Yeah, I know that they're struggling, that they're facing the kind of struggles that every family went through, but look what they're doing on the other side. But they're also,
like, think about what's over that wall.
Look at what they're doing over there. Look at where he's going to work.
Yeah.
In fact, he doesn't even have to drive to work or nothing. He just goes there.
Fucking lives on campus, basically.
Gosh.
Yeah, nuance.
Seance. And I'm always a bit iffy when it comes to biopics, in that sometimes when I watch a biopic I want a bit more to it. I don't just want a retelling of events. It's like how I preferred Rocket Man to Bohemian Rhapsody, because Bohemian Rhapsody was kind of just a straight retelling of events, whereas Rocket Man had all these fantasy sequences and just had a bit more like flair to it. But when the performances are strong enough, I think you can just do like a...
Yeah, you can play it pretty straight when the story and the characters are interesting enough to kind of carry that. I do agree they should have used some of Trump's songs in there.
Yeah.
Some of his musical numbers.
Some of the Sinatra numbers.
Big,
Trump walks out and he goes, "For once in my life." I have someone who needs me.
You're flying high in April, shot down in May.
That's life. That's what people say.
Everyone's saying
Everyone's saying
Everyone's
it.
saying
That's
life. Oh man, yeah. So yeah, all in all, a really good film about a very tricky subject matter.
Yeah. All in all, this movie gets a good rating.
Good. Next up, Megalopolis.
That's a fucking mouthful.
Megalopolis.
That's a fucking mouthful.
Megalopolis.
Fucking hell, what the fuck? What were we thinking?
What were we thinking with this? What were we thinking as a society to let this happen?
We allowed this to happen. Somebody said, I've got an idea, and nobody told them no. In fact, actually, several people told them no. One person caved.
One person caved. One person remembered that, to be fair, they made arguably one of the best film trilogies of all time.
They said, brother, look at your catalogue, of course.
I'm going to let you do whatever you want. Not a recommend for me.
No.
Well, I mean, listen.
Can't be.
This is I have complicated feelings about this film. I wouldn't recommend it to people because it's kind of horrible in a lot of ways.
I wouldn't recommend it because this movie fucking sucks.
It fucking sucks.
But
hear me out though. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was. It was very silly and the insane vision of an old man who's made a lot of incredible films, and they just sort of let him do this, I guess. And you know what? It was his passion project, and you could tell there was a lot of passion and heart behind this. As ridiculous and as disjointed and as nonsensical as it was, I can really respect him just making it. Just the fact that it exists.
The fact that he was able to do this is credit.
Right.
A credit to his name.
Exactly. And you know what? We're never going to see anything like this again. And it's just so unique. And from that point of view, I like it.
It's one of those things where we say it's like sometimes, because I did a year in uni and part of it was like script writing. I'm trying to remember what they call it. Essentially, when you do a script, you have to be able to have like essentially like a 1-page pitch.
Yeah.
That kind of summarizes what the idea is and how you're going to market this to people. How do you summarize this movie in like just a single kind of sentence or a single kind of idea?
Yeah, what's the synopsis here? What's
how
the
do you
logline?
do this?
Man tries to make city out of his own material.
Also, everyone's got like Roman names.
Yeah, we're also going to put like PowerPoint slides between each scene or something.
Yeah, with like sort of various quotes from people throughout history.
Yeah.
He can stop time.
By the way, he can stop time.
By the way, he can stop time.
Okay, is that a metaphor or is that like a literal power he has?
No, I think it's because Adam Driver can actually do that, and he said he wouldn't.
So we're just gonna let him do that.
Wanted to do that in the film.
It's all right. Well, you can sort of think it's a metaphor for a while, and then he sort of does it in front of somebody, and it happens. So
yeah. Also, I want to put a controversial figure in here. I don't know, just spitballing. Shia LaBeouf. And
you know what? Fuck it. Well, we've got one controversial figure. Let's put in another John Voight.
That's true. You know.
Fuck it.
Where
else are they gonna go?
I know. You know.
What else are they gonna do? So yeah, as an enjoyable and fun experience as it was, this film is so fucking wacky and weird, and doesn't make a lot of sense half the time. A lot of the characters don't seem to have ever spoken English before.
This movie feels like what you would get if you put into an AI generator as a prompt, make me a sci-fi movie.
Just kind of again, a lot of ideas packed into one, and sort of dressed up in a way that makes it all seem very epic and meaningful and stuff. And then a lot of the times, just sort of things are just kind of happening. A sort of interpretation I took from it, if you'll allow me to interpret anything from this.
Yeah.
This is about a man trying to create his perfect paradise, the passion project he's been trying to do his whole life. He's trying to create that in a crumbling society where everyone around him is telling him he can't do it. Francis Ford Coppola is a very revered director who is trying to create his perfect passion project in a crumbling society where everyone around him is telling him he can't do it. That's what I took from it.
Is that it's about him, but in a very roundabout kind of way.
Yeah, you know, a very revered figure, like, you know, trying to make that perfect thing. And it's like, once I sort of thought about that, the ending kind of makes sense, because this film just sort of ends. Like, he just sort of does it. It kind of seems like it skips a little bit of time, and then it's like, oh, he's done it then, I guess. And so it kind of makes more sense when it's like, you see a lot of the struggle, but then you just kind of see the final product, you know? And it's like, well, I guess he did it. And that's kind of how you feel watching this film. Because there was a lot of stories about, like, him struggling to get it distributed, like, struggling to get it funded, all that stuff. And then you're in the cinema like, God damn, he did it. And, yeah, sort of a weirdly inspiring story. Yeah.
I sort of gathered a lot of it to be kind of the nature of conflict that man has by default, in the idea of that you're presented with an idea that both on paper and in practice has absolutely no downside to it and is going to improve your life, is going to make everything better, and there's absolutely no drawbacks to it. You're still going to get pushback.
Right.
People are still going to fight against it. They're going to come up with any reason that they want because they want to cling to power. It's almost as if you come up with this idea that is so perfect that people will just assume that there's got to be some kind of underlying thing that is bad. The people, by their nature, are skeptical, and it feels a lot like you're trying to play God at times. You've created this new element or this new material, whatever it is, that has no downside, but we're so set in our ways. We're like, well, guys, we've lived with like concrete and mortar for years and it's been fine. Like, why do you want this new thing?
Why do you want to change it?
And they all have Roman names because Rome wasn't built in a day. That was the takeaway. Rome wasn't built in a day. It's going to take time to change people's perspectives. That's why they all have Roman names, to remind you of that thought.
This film is my best of the month. Yeah, so there's a strange amount of kind of meaning from a lot of these very oddly paced scenes, and it just makes for a very interesting experience, if nothing else.
This was my Joker 2 movie because I struggled to stay awake for a lot of it.
Oh, see, that's an interesting difference. Is I really enjoyed it the whole time. I was like finding it like funny bad at times, but I was always entertained the whole way through because I was like, what kind of wacky shit is going to happen next? Fucking, what's Adam Driver going to get up to next, eh?
I think it was the opposite way around in that Joker 2. I was like, I'm so enamored by anything that Joaquin Phoenix does. I think he's fantastic anytime he's on screen, that he can carry a movie that bad and keep me watching it. It's interesting to think that a movie that is this kind of messy, the most interesting part of this movie is the conclusions that you draw from it, is the interpretations you make, because it's so messy and so nonsensical at times that if you ask like 100 different people, it's more than likely you'll get like 100 different takeaways from it.
And you can kind of pretty well justify all of them, probably, in some way, shape or form. So, just a real complicated, very odd mess of a film that is just kind of I'm just kind of glad it exists.
It's a bit of a slog sometimes. I think,
it's definitely bloated. It's bloated for sure. But hey, it just sort of felt like a lot of characters doing a lot of shit.
I think we need just movies that are divisive. You know, a movie that's universally good and universally liked. Fine, we'll have fun with it. Whatever. But you're gonna remember a movie that's divisive, I think.
Well, that's the thing is no matter how anyone feels about this is an important landmark in film history now. Like, it's always gonna be like just revered as this weird moment in film history where this incredibly important director just kind of put out his insane ramblings.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see in a few years where people start doing like film essays. Like how we study film in uni, people in the future who are going to be studying film in uni are going to be doing essays on this movie.
Megalopolis. God, I wish we had Megalopolis back then.
Yeah. Next up, Terrifier 3. That's how many there is. This was so close to being my top pick for the month. I love this movie. I think that's somewhat of a controversial opinion, I guess, because the Terrifier series, I think, they're movies that are like Marmite. You're either going to love them or hate them. But I think, because these movies, in terms of sort of their story and their characters, that's not their strong suit, and that's not really what you're watching for. What you're watching for is the performance of David Howard Thornton in the role of Art the Clown, and for just how big and bloody and disgusting a lot of these kills and these set pieces are. That's where Terrifier as a film series really kind of shines through. Art the Clown, dude, I love this guy.
Oh yeah,
I love him. I think we've talked a little bit in the past, I don't know in video, but we've definitely talked about how I think horror icons are harder to come by these days.
Yeah, we've talked about how horrors are more about the premise now than kind of a recurring killer or
than
whatever.
the villain. I think I looked up a list because I was interested in sort of what other people's takes were, and the closest things you get are sort of like the Nun from the Conjuring / Nun movies, or Annabelle, Toby, yeah. But I think Art the Clown is probably like the closest thing we have to like a modern horror icon.
Right.
People are going to remember this guy, and a big part of it is David Howard Thornton in this role, because Art the Clown is completely mute. Like, he never says a word in these movies, completely silent killer. But it's his physical performance that makes him so iconic. This is a guy who can switch, like, on a dime from being really disturbing, really sadistic, really violent, to doing, like, jokey, silly clown stuff. Like, he'll stand there being really intimidating, and then suddenly he gets the horn out and stuff.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's so fun to watch him do his thing. And I think the story of Terrifier, not the story of the movies, but, like, how these movies came to be is really interesting. So Damien Leone, who directs these movies, started off with a couple of short films. I think he did The Night Circle, and then there's a short film called Terrifier. Then he directed his first feature film, All Hallows Eve, which is kind of like a compilation type movie, sort of like a semi like anthology kind of movie that incorporates those other two short films. So it's easier now to see his first work, which is pretty cool.
Okay.
And then eventually he took the idea of Terrifier and Art the Clown, did a full movie on it. First movie I think was done pretty shoestring budget. Then he got crowdfunded to do the second one, and then this third one finally has a theatrical release, which is really cool to see the progression of how they've just gotten bigger and bigger, and it's turned from a cult following into getting an actual mainstream cinema release for it. So the story of how it's been made has been really cool to follow. And with this third one, you could tell in terms of like the makeup effects, all of the gore, all of the blood, all of these set pieces are so much bigger, because originally it was Damien Leone himself doing the makeup for everything. He was doing like everything. He was just directing, he was doing all the makeup and the prosthetics and everything.
His name over
it's just him like
catering best boy gaffer.
But this third one's great. It's also one of those movies where you can watch either at Halloween or Christmas, because it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah,
it's a Christmas classic.
It goes
that
up there
everyone's
with Nightmare Before Christmas as both a Halloween.
The crossover ones,
the
yeah,
November
it's like,
films.
It's Black Christmas, it's Nightmare Before Christmas, and it's this now. So you just see like how that's impacted David Howard Thornton's performance in this movie. That he has a lot more to play around with. There's a whole scene in a bar where he sees a guy dressed as Santa Claus, and he acts like it's the real thing. Like he has this kind of childlike wonder to him, and then he becomes the killer, the murderous clown.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that, because obviously it kind of ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, and we had characters that were introduced in the second one, they come back in this one, and now we've kind of got a main protagonist to follow. We've got a final girl who acts as our sort of anchor point in this movie. They all kind of follow on from each other, so I'm hoping that there's going to be more to come. And then this movie is successful. I think it has been pretty good. I'm sure I've read that it actually outperformed Joker on some weekends. So not bad for like the little clown that could. I will say, even though I'm recommending it, like it's a recommend in terms of if you're into that kind of like splatterfest, the classic slashers, you're probably going to really like it. Because it's all about the creativity of how gross they do the makeup and the kills and everything. Yeah. But if you're not into that, then you're probably not going to enjoy this. A lot of people say it's gore for gore's sake. I think it's more just to emphasize how sadistic and how evil this clown is. There's a lot of kind of expansion to his lore in this movie, and how he keeps kind of coming back from the dead and being an almost immortal kind of killer. And it's just a fun ride. Nice. I absolutely like this was the kind of screening I went into, and you could tell everyone was just having a blast watching it.
Yeah.
Like people were like laughing at certain points, and we're all kind of like, oh, like fucking. It's very much like you're laughing 1 minute to fucking wincing the next. It's such a fun ride. I think this was the best horror easily of October.
Next up, Black Dog, and I ain't talking the Led Zeppelin song.
I ain't talking Sirius Black.
No, I'm not talking him either. I'm talking an incredible Chinese film directed by Guan Hu. This film is not only a recommend from me, it's my best of the month. Yeah! Let's go! Yes! This film is amazing. This is amazing, man. I only saw it like this month, obviously, but it's already so important to me. It's one of those films that is just gonna be in that like pantheon forever. It's just incredible. It's set in 2008. on the eve of the Beijing Olympics, and the main character Lang just gets out of jail after 10 years, and he returns back to his town, which has kind of been half abandoned, and there's a big stray dog problem. So he gets a job to gather up all these stray dogs, round them up.
You're gonna corral them dogs.
But there's one that supposedly has rabies that they're all trying to catch for a reward, which is the titular black dog. And they end up having this unlikely bond and this unlikely friendship together. It just plays out so beautifully. So his character, he's very stoic. He doesn't talk much at all. Like, the performance from Eddie Peng here, like, he manages to carry this film with barely any dialogue. What he says not even many facial features either. It's all in kind of body language, or you can just kind of tell what he's thinking when he's in these scenes and people are just sort of chatting to him and he's not really responding back, but he's sort of actively listening. There's some issues he comes back to when he gets back to the town, and it's sort of about him trying to find kind of redemption, trying to start his life back up again and find his feet again in this town that's kind of changed since he has last been here. As soon as he creates this bond with this dog, he's sort of able to kind of deal with all that a bit better, and they kind of help each other through their like respective problems. It just like kind of profoundly affected me a bit. Like, I'm a dog lover myself. I have a dog, and I've loved animals in general my whole life, and these sort of films are always in danger of being a bit too sappy, but you always kind of love them, There's the Marley and Me's, there's all these famous ones where kind of the dog is one of the main characters and it's all about the bond and stuff. But this just does it in such a subtle way because, like I say, he's such a stoic character and doesn't show much emotion. And so you can see the dog getting through to him like no one else does, like none of these humans do, and the dog does. And I think that just says a lot about our human connection with animals and what it can really mean. So yeah, this just sort of, it really, really got into my heart, and it fucking stayed there. So I'm sounding very dramatic right now, but fucking see this film. The connection we have with animals is very important.
And they're real stories.
And I don't trust people that don't like animals. I don't trust them.
And what about other animals that don't like other animals?
Well, that's fine. It's none of my business.
That's like people not liking people. That's fine. That's normal. That's actually normal.
Yeah,
that's probably most people would agree with that. Next up, Transformers 1. Not the first one though. It's very.
I could have sworn they've done some before.
Yeah, maybe
this is the first one.
Sort of.
Could have sworn they've done some already.
In a way, I guess. Right off the bat, recommend from me. Quite easily. I went into this basically not knowing jack shit about Transformers lore or characters or universe.
Oh, that surprises me. I thought you were into them.
No, I saw the first Michael Bay one. I said that's enough for me.
Fair enough, yeah. Fair enough.
I didn't grow up watching the cartoons either. So I know very little about the Transformers universe.
I know they turn into cars and stuff.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's about all you really need to know. But this movie, as like an origin story, does a pretty good job of kind of filling you in as you go, and not as a massive kind of lore dump at the beginning. There are those kind of moments where it gives you like the exposition of here's the stuff you need to know, but it does it well enough and kind of spreads out throughout that it's more like you're discovering stuff about this world and what's going on with the characters instead of just here's a narrator telling you. Fucking another all-star lineup as well.
Shia LaBeouf, John Voight, Adam Driver, they're all here.
No, Shia LaBeouf's had his time in the Transformers world.
Yeah, true, yeah.
No, it's Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson.
You're thinking of Avengers, I think.
Yeah, Steve Buscemi, famously in the Avengers.
You're thinking of Avengers.
Yeah. No, like big lineup, and everyone does a great job here. And I knew enough about the characters to sort of know the designs of them, and I know, okay, like who this is who this is supposed to be. Because some of the major characters start off with different names, and then they become the characters we know.
Right.
So like we're following Orion Pax as our main character, who later becomes Optimus Prime.
I was going to say Owen P. I know what's coming in.
Not to be confused with, what's his... I'm going to not remember it exactly because it's like a letter and a number. I think he goes just by like D17 or something. And then he becomes Megatron. But his arc throughout the movie of slowly kind of turning against everything that he's been taught and everything that he's been told is the way things are and what is right. is really well done. It's a nice kind of slow burn of him gradually becoming more and more resentful until eventually they have the face-off at the end, which is a cool thing in that they set up a villain in this movie, and then that villain is kind of the sub-boss. Megatron's kind of like the final boss.
Right, yeah.
But the villain they established from the beginning comes before that, and he's the driving force that turns Megatron evil in a really cool moment where like he just gets ripped in half. But just to add to the movie, this doesn't add to the movie in terms of like how it was actually made and what it is. I saw this in 4DX. I think it was when we saw...
Did the chairs start transforming and stuff?
Yeah, like crushes you, like severs your spine. I think it was the Fall Guy we went to go see in 4DX.
Yeah.
And it was a bit more... I remember it being a bit more reserved.
Right,
I remember it not being like that kind of intense.
There was a long periods of time where it just didn't do anything, I think.
Watching Transformers in 4DX, it actively tries to throw you out the fucking chair. There are so many action sequences in this where these chairs are going wild. Yeah, I think for someone who's not like a massive Transformers fan, it's easy to watch this and get into it because it is an origin story, so you don't need to know anything prior to going into it. And just performance-wise and action-wise and the music and the design of the world and the motion is so fluid. It's just enjoyable. It's just, there's not too much to say about it. It's an enjoyable film. It's fun. Nice. And that's what animated films should be for the most part.
Absolutely.
Just a fun experience.
Absolutely.
And then Quavo does a song at the end.
Oh, hell yeah. You should have said.
Quavo and Ty Dolla Sign do a song at the end.
You should have opened with that. You should have.
I would have been right Transformers. There. Quavo and Ty Dolla Sign do a song at the end.
Right, I'm booking a seat. I'm booking a seat. Oh, you're up next again.
Yeah, just me. I get the sip. You get no sip.
It's your turn for a sip. I can't wait for mine. I can't wait for my sip.
Next up, The Wild Robot. That's right, another animated movie about robots. It's been a big year for animated movies about robots.
Let me guess, you watched Robots next.
No, I don't think that came out this year. I don't think Ewan McGregor's even still alive.
I need to go.
I need to get my affairs in order. This movie is not only a recommend from me. This is my top pick for the month.
Let's fucking
go! Oh, geez, God, where do I start? This is probably the most emotional I've been in recent memory watching a movie. And it helped that I was the only one there. This was an empty screen, it was just me.
Oh, thank God.
So nobody was there to bear witness to me fucking bawling my eyes out in the back. If I kept count, it was probably about 4 or 5 different times I cried during this movie. This is one of DreamWorks' best. When they try and when they're really on form, DreamWorks easily matches like Disney and Pixar in terms of like the quality of their films. They've had some real top tier stuff, and I feel like DreamWorks have always been kind of seen as like second best to those guys. And there's sort of been an upswing recently in that people really like the most recent Puss in Boots movie, and now everyone really likes this as well, with good reason. Again, like really strong voice cast in this. Lupita Nyong'o voices Roz, like the main robot. Absolutely stellar. Pedro Pascal as Fink, the fox in this, again, just does his like very suave, very charismatic kind of Pedro Pascal-esque performance.
Hello, I'm Pedro Pascal.
I don't think he sounds like that.
Welcome to The Wild Robot.
I will give you a voice you can do. A little appearance from Matt Berry in this.
I am the Wild Robot.
Well, he wasn't the robot. I think he was like a beaver.
I'm a little beaver.
I'm a beaver, and I'm trying to cut down this tree. He has some surprising names like Matt Berry. I guess Matt Berry's been sort of involved with voice acting and done a few roles here and there. Bill Nighy makes a brief appearance.
The science guy,
well. Yeah, Bill Nighy, the science guy. And Kit Connor is the voice of Bright Bill, who's the Gosling turned goose who we see and grow up with in this movie. I will put it, that's the first time I cried. They do like a montage of teaching him how to fly, and I was like,
and he fucking dies. He fucking falls off and fucking dies.
Fucking do this. I don't know what it is like. they've hit something special in terms of their animation in DreamWorks. I don't know if they were the first to do it, but I feel like Spider-Verse has had a big impact on, more than we think it has,
Definitely.
a big impact on the animation scene, in that they're taking more risks in kind of blending styles a lot more. Some of the locations in this seem like they were like hand painted.
Oh.
Like the way the backgrounds look a lot of the time seems like they were like painted, and then you've got the sort of the CG characters on top, but they still fit. It doesn't seem like they're just jutting out and like it's all odd. No, like stylistically it all fits together. And what I can appreciate about this movie a lot as well is that even though it's like a family film and like kids are gonna go see this, it doesn't treat the audience any less because of it. It doesn't shy away from certain topics of like death and loss and the idea of not being able to communicate to people like your true feelings. It hits a lot of these subjects like right on the head and does it in a very mature and nuanced kind of way. That's what carries this movie, is the heart of it, is the heart and the message and the emotions and the relationships between these characters. And they take plenty of time to sort of linger on these moments where they are pushing some kind of idea or they're pushing some kind of message, and it's enough to take you in and put it in your head, but not enough, like it doesn't leave it on there so that you start feeling like, okay, they're just trying to like spell stuff out for us because they think we're stupid. I mean, this was again another movie where the experience of watching it is a big part of why I enjoyed it so much and why I rate it so highly. Any movie that can have such an emotional impact on you and leave you in tears like multiple times, they're obviously doing something right.
I mean, you also saw this in 4DX, didn't you?
Yeah, like, and it just makes you like walk like a crab. Just as like a little side bit, that's one of my favorite things, is the way they were so playful with the animation in this. Like, you have Roz the robot sort of learning from her surroundings, and she's on this island where there is no human presence, it's all just nature. And so every time she learns to sort of mimic these creatures, it's the idea of this like this big metal contraption like perfectly replicating the way animals move. And the animation captures it so perfectly. There is a small amount of human presence later on, but for the most part, it's a story about like nature and the relationship of sort of technology and how it affects the natural world and sort of the keeping the balance between that. But yeah, easy go watch it. It's probably on streaming now.
DreamWorks Plus.
Yeah, get onto DreamWorks.
Log in on DreamWorks Plus.
Get on DreamWorks TV /Rakuten.
I thought I had a boat going.
Thought I had a heart attack coming on.
Sorry, I thought I had a heart attack there.
Sorry, I just
Sorry.
For some reason like I couldn't feel my pulse.
For some reason, I just had a burning pain in my chest. Anyway, that must be nothing. Next up, Timestalker. This is rare for the ones I see solo because, not bragging, but I tend to have very good taste in films. But this is not a recommend from me.
Oh, boo.
Fortunately, it's not.
Boo.
Listen, this film had a great concept, but I liked the concept more than the execution. I think it could have been done a lot better. So basically, it's this woman that keeps getting reincarnated into these different lives throughout different time periods. And every life, she runs into the love of her life, but she ends up dying right before she can properly like confess to him or meet him or whatever. So it's about her kind of chasing down, trying to find this guy. But for such a sort of big concept like reincarnation, the film kind of felt a bit small. So it's a comedy. It's a British comedy, first of all. The concept makes it sound like it's going to be a big dramatic thing. But no, it is a comedy. But a lot of it didn't quite land for me. I don't know if, the star and the director, Alice Lowe, I don't know if I just like...
I don't know if I just made that up.
I don't know if I just like made her up. I don't know if her humor just doesn't gel or something, but I didn't find it that funny. There was bits here and there that were quite good, but just all in all, I think, I don't know, there was something about it. It was sort of going through linearly through these time periods, but then a couple of times later in the film it sort of went back and did a couple of bits, and I think it should have committed one way or the other. I think it could have been interesting if they kept flicking about all these different time periods throughout the film, or just straight up do one after the other. I think to kind of half mix that and not really go one way or the other just sort of messed it up and made it a bit confusing. You're not really sure throughout the film whether anyone is aware of this or not, like whether she remembers her past lives or like whether she starts to remember she sort of gets hints here and there, but then like it seems like suddenly she just kind of knows everything and just kind of knows like who he is and how to find him and stuff. So yeah, from that point of view, I just thought it could have been done in a better way. But you know, like I say, it's an interesting concept. So try again. Try again.
Do it again. But this time, do it right.
Yeah, it was a weird one. It was just a bit disappointing, like I say, because it seemed interesting. But hey ho.
It's like, yeah, the idea
Can't
of
win
it's
them all.
cool, but they just didn't.
But yeah, I think it was maybe too big of a concept to the budget they had or something. It had the kind of vibe of Ghosts, the show, if anyone's seen that, like in terms of doing the different time periods in a kind of a British comedy way, you know, where everyone is in like the 1700s, but they're all just talking like normal.
Yeah.
That kind of vibe. From that kind of perspective, I sort of enjoyed that part of it. I enjoyed the sort of sets and the costumes they had for each time period. That was very fun. So there's bits and bobs there, but you know, yeah, like I say, it didn't all quite gel for me. So not to recommend, I'm afraid.
Next up, Never Let Go. Oh no, that wasn't a command.
Sorry.
No, I should have been more clear about that. Should have been more clear. I was just saying the name of the film. I was saying it this way. I wasn't saying it this way. Sorry. That's on me. That's on me. I think I should go. No, right off the bat, I'd say probably not a recommend from me. And it falls very much into that sort of middling territory of I didn't hate it, but at the same time, it's not good enough to warrant a recommendation. This movie is a very confusing one in that it's another of those movies where you're watching, and I think we've asked the question at some point where we've been very confused over whether we actually think Halle Berry is a good actor or not.
Yeah, I believe we watched Moonfall. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
This is pre-Channel days. We watched Moonfall and kind of were like, is Halle Berry good?
Halle Berry good?
Or is she just in a lot of good films?
Like, she's fine, like she's serviceable in X-Men, but
yeah.
like... And this is definitely... She's like half and half in this. There's certain scenes where she's great, and there's certain ones where I'm just like, are you just reading the script?
Right.
Are you just reading? Are you just saying the words in front of you?
Yeah, I kind of hate where you can tell an actor is just doing the lines, you know?
Where they've just memorized the lines and they're just doing it. Although, I've forgotten the name, but
Halle
like
Berry.
Put the names up there. There's like 3 characters in this movie and I forget the names.
I forgot all of them. That's a good sign.
But the 2 kids in this movie, at least to their credit, are not annoying. And I feel like that's a rarity in films, is anytime you put kids in, they are there just to piss you off and be stupid, especially a horror movie. There's an interesting kind of thing going on with this. So the whole concept with the movie is that these 3 people live out in the middle of nowhere. There's some kind of mysterious event where it makes you think, for the most part, it's like a post-apocalyptic kind of story. Or is it? But they live out in this isolated cabin, sort of like this swampy woodland kind of area, and they're told that the whole world around them is surrounded by an evil presence, but the house itself is built on like protected land. So as long as they're in the house, or if they're attached to a rope which is connected to the house, they're fine. The evil can't get to them. Then these 2 kids sort of act as the polar opposites of each other, in that one of them completely believes what the mother's telling them, does everything she says, follows all the rules, and then you've got the other one who sort of questions like, well, what if it's not true? What if like she's been lying to us this whole time? And that's where sort of the conflict of this movie arises, whether or not this character played by Halle Berry is trustworthy, or whether she's paranoid, or whether she's been affected in some way. And there's a really cool kind of like Garden of Eden kind of thing going on. Anytime we see a physical manifestation of this evil presence, they're portrayed with some kind of snake-like quality. So it's kind of the idea of, you know, the Garden of Eden, they're told there's this one rule you can't do. You can't eat from the fruit from this tree. I'm not going to tell you why. I'm not going to explain any of it. I'm just saying you can't do it. Just like with this, there's sort of the one rule, and it's not explained why. Which is a big thing about this movie, is it does kind of present this idea of like interpretation on religion, and like, is it about just blindly following and doing what you're told and accepting everything as gospel regardless, or is it good to have a bit of healthy sort of questioning and skepticism and take your own conclusions and do your own investigation and work things out for yourself? And then the movie just gets very confused with its ending. It was very, very strange. It does suggest that part of it was untrue, because here's the spoilers for a movie that no one cares about. This movie progresses to a point where their cabin ends up burning down, and both the boys are rescued by like emergency services, and the world is normal. And it makes you question as to whether Halle Berry just had some kind of psychological issues that made her start thinking this way, or whether it was like an issue of faith, and then tries to leave you on a sort of cliffhanger of a like, oh, were parts of it real, were parts of it affected? Because they do sort of introduce this idea of obviously mental health issues being able to be passed down, being hereditary. So they end on a sort of cliffhanger kind of note, but other than that, it's very sort of vague, to the point where normally I think that's pretty good, that you can draw your own conclusions, but this doesn't provide enough to cling on to. It's a very confused kind of movie in that they don't really fully commit to anything. Even some of the horror aspects I think could have been done better. Some of the imagery was cool, but it was spoiled by the fact that it was in the trailer.
Oh right, yeah.
Like that.
That's always the worst.
That thing with the multiple hands like climbing up from behind the tree is probably the coolest shot in this movie, and then it's like right at the end of the trailer. So
don't get me started. Do not get me started again.
Yeah, just a mid-tier film. Next up, Hellboy, The Crooked Man. Sort of. Yeah, kind of. I'll say this is not a recommend from me, but I am fully prepared to take any heat that may come with that, because I'll be the first to admit I know nothing about Hellboy lore or the comics or anything, so I don't know how faithful any of this is to the source material.
Is this the first monthly thing where we have more not recommends than recommends?
It could be.
Might well be.
It very well could be.
Fucking hate films, me.
Oh, I'm miserable. I'm fucking miserable.
No, this has put me right off. Tell you what, this month has put me right off.
No, I'll tell you what, this film in specific has put me off films in general.
I'm not watching it anymore. That's it.
I remember, at the very least, watching the Ron Perlman, the Guillermo del Toro Hellboy movies, and thinking they were a lot of fun. There's a lot of creativity in them, a lot of great action. They're very colourful, very kind of wacky, because Hellboy comes from a pretty wacky sort of comics series from what I've seen. Like, some of the characters, some of the designs are quite out there, and they made this Hellboy movie and just drained all the colour from it. It's like,
he's supposed to be so red.
They took the saturation, just slid it way down. This movie is grey. You can barely tell he's red in this.
Purgatory boy.
The whole thing with Hellboy is that there's a lot of creativity you can put into it, because the whole concept is that he fights a lot of sort of mythological, urban legend, spooky story kind of creatures, and a lot of like hellspawn. So there's a lot of creative input you can put into this. But what he ends up battling in these movies is like witches and zombies, and that's about it, other than the Crooked Man himself, who again has sort of quite a generic design. But yeah, not a lot of thought and creativity put into the character design. I don't know if that's due to like budget constraints, because this was not like a big title. I didn't see a single trailer for this, I don't think. I just saw it was on at the cinema. I was like, oh, okay, they released a new Hellboy movie.
I think I maybe heard they were doing another one, but I didn't know when it was coming out. I didn't hear about it coming out.
I think I saw like one screenshot of the guy in like the Hellboy get-up.
I think the problem is everyone likes the Ron Perlman interpretation.
Yeah.
And the David Harbour one, which I think is the only one I've seen, was like horrible.
It was quite panned by everyone that saw it.
So I think probably like it's just been kind of buried by that, in terms of like people just see it. Oh, someone else is gonna try Hellboy now. It's probably gonna be shit. It's never going to be Ron Perlman. I feel like anyone who does it now has to live up to the Ron Perlman one.
I think they did it right the first time. They kind of got it right the first time, in that the fun with Hellboy is that it takes a source material that is focused on a lot of dark stuff, but puts a sort of campy, fun twist on it.
Yeah.
Whereas like these other interpretations have gone fully like, no, this has to be dark. It's about hell and Nazis. It's got to be dark and brooding. It's like, no, it doesn't. No, just make it fun.
I think he's supposed to be a bit of a fun character, right?
Yeah, the whole kind of point is that he's in this wacky world where there's a lot of crazy stuff he has to put up, and he's the most like surly kind of just dry, sarcastic, cigar smoking piece of shit. Yeah, I don't know if it was just because of the budget of this movie. This felt like it was like a fan film that somehow made it into cinemas. I don't know what it was in specific. It felt like watching a fan film. I don't know if it's just because of the costumes or because of the set, or because it's not really sets anywhere. It's set in it's 1950s, I want to say. It's either 1950s or 60s Appalachia, so it's out in like the fucking middle of nowhere, backwoods America.
Right, yeah.
So all of the backgrounds, all of the settings in this is just trees.
Nice.
It's just like trees and open sort of plains.
Sounds similar to a film you just talked about.
But not as good. Yeah, there's stuff they tried in this. There's like a preacher character who shows up midway through, who is the most entertaining part of this, because he's everything that you don't expect a preacher to be. He's like foul-mouthed and he goes on all these rants all the time. He's just very like in your face and straight up about stuff. And he's fun to watch whenever he's on screen, but everyone else is just kind of It's just the movie's going along. People are just being where they need to be for the story to progress. And for a character that has so much potential and like a world that has so much potential for you to have fun with, this was the opposite of fun. This was just very, very, very much a chore to sit through for the most part. But one thing they did get right is what I've seen consistently with these Hellboy movies is his gun is real fucking big and packs a punch. Like they got the weight of his gun proper good, is that it doesn't feel like it's just a regular handgun. It feels like a cannon. It feels like a hand cannon. They got the impact and the sound of it like just right. So whenever he's shooting stuff, real cool. Everything else, not so much. But hey, like if this movie was true to the comics and this is actually like a good interpretation of Hellboy,
let us know.
Like I'll be the first to admit, okay, like if it's faithful to the comics, I'll give it all the credit in the world for doing that.
If it's faithful to the comics, then turns out the comics are bad.
Sorry. Oh god, no, I'm doubling down.
Next up, Midas Man. This is a recommend from me.
Yay, we're back to the good.
Our first recommend in a while. In a good 15, 20 minutes.
We got through that.
We did it. We got
through the dip. We got through the dip.
We're back to a semi-good one. It's not a super strong recommend, however, but it's just enough. Because I personally enjoyed it, but there are some criticisms that I have still. So this is the biopic of Brian Epstein, who was the Beatles' manager until he died in 1967, and then they went on to manage themselves after that. But he was the man that shaped them into the band we know, the iconic suits and the bowl cuts they had in their early careers, and just he's kind of the one that molded them to be the band they were and shot them into the stardom they had in that time. So, an incredibly important figure in musical history. The biopic kind of doesn't feel as big or as important as it should be. The approach it's taken is kind of a more wholesome. We're kind of focusing on his relationship with the Beatles and with the other artists he represented around the time, Cilla Black, Jerry and the Pacemakers, a lot of those famous artists that were coming up through the 60s. And just kind of how good and personable and how much of a good manager he was to these acts and kind of shaped them to be who they are. But I think it has the Bohemian Rhapsody problem. The problem a lot of people have with Bohemian Rhapsody is it kind of sanitizes the character and the time and kind of shies away from some of the kind of edgier, darker aspects of like what was going on.
The drugs.
You know what I'm talking about, the drugs, the sex of the gay variety. All the classic things.
All of that.
Because Midas Man references those plenty, but I think doesn't quite go into them enough and sort of, sanitizes it a little bit. But like I say, I think the approach it was going for was to kind of highlight how good he was at what he did, but to the detriment of his health, because he was a workaholic. It's all he did for like the better part of a decade, and it drove him to his death in the end. And I thought the casting was really good. Jacob Fortune Lloyd here in the lead role as Epstein himself. And they cast the Beatles as 4 relatively unknown actors, unknown to me anyway, which I think is a good move, because it's always... Many people have played the Beatles over the years in various things, but, it's it's kind of big shoes to fill, because I think we all know all four of them so well, because they all have had such well-defined personalities in the Beatles that, like, we all kind of know their quirks and their mannerisms and the way they talk and what they all did with the band. We've all seen so much footage and audio of the Beatles over the years. So it's obviously huge roles to fill, and I think these four guys did it pretty well, apart from the fact that John Lennon was, like, tiny. Like, he's so much shorter than the rest of them. It's like really funny.
That's how it was. No, that's how it was. Like, whenever you see the images,
the doctored.
Yeah, well, if you think of like the famous
history.
the Abbey Road of them crossing, he's like actually quite far back,
right? Yeah,
or quite far forward to make it look big. He's quite far.
Yeah, George was really far back.
Yeah,
John was forward. It made it all look
just so perspective wise,
it worked.
It all worked
perfectly. But yeah, like I mentioned, because it shies away from the darker elements, the ending feels a bit sudden. So it ends on, I suppose, similar to Bohemian Rhapsody in a way, which ends on Live Aid. This ends on the All You Need Is Love satellite broadcast, which is broadcast to 400 million people around the globe for the first time ever, and it was the Beatles. They chose to represent that, and they played All You Need Is Love. And then it just sort of says 2 months later he died of an overdose. It just sort of does that thing that biopics do, where it's like,
where it ends with
they kind of wrap up everything, like this is what happened. The Beatles went on to be the Beatles.
The Beatles went on to be forgotten by everyone apart from this one guy.
Yeah. Whereas I think they should have dealt with his death in the film, because it was a huge part of the Beatles' career. It had a huge impact on where they were as a band and what they did going forward after that, and just the music industry at large. I think it could have explored that a bit, but the problem was the film had him talking to the camera. It was doing the Fleabag thing, the Ferris Bueller thing. Throughout the film, he was kind of monologuing a bit to the camera. And so the fact that they'd kind of committed to doing that made it like, if he died, then he's the one telling the story, so it kind of has to end now. So I guess fair. But to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the talking to the camera thing. They sort of abandon it halfway through and forget about it, and then do it like maybe 2 or 3 more times. Whereas the first sort of 20 minutes, he's like constantly like telling us stuff. And they do a lot of, like, they cover the big Beatles tours by basically having him in front of a green screen with like stock footage and him just kind of explaining what happened to the camera. So I found that a little bit lazy. I think just having kind of montages like that can be kind of lazy storytelling. But, you know, they had a lot to fit into, you know, just less than 2 hours. Yeah, they did what they could, and I think what it does well is represents the relationship he had with the musicians he represented, especially the Fab Four themselves, but I think is a little too sanitized, and I think it could have been a bit more real to respect the legacy a bit more. But, you know, but saying that, I'd recommend it still. I'd still recommend it, because I think if you're a Beatles fan like me, if you're a fan of music, 60s music history, whatever, I think you'll find parts of it interesting.
And considering how influential and important this guy was to the music industry, now we know, if you ever want to complain about the state of the music industry today, where things have gone, if things are getting overplayed on the radio, you know who to blame.
Abstain!
No,
Abstain!
No, just be careful which one.
Abstain!
Just be careful which one you're thinking about. Next up, Smile 2. That's 1. 2. No, they didn't do that this time around. That was just the first one. You fucking stop it now. This is a recommend from me.
Woo!
We got through the dip. Now we're back to the good horror.
We're heading back up now. We're heading back uphill.
Back to good. I saw this movie right after seeing the first one, because they did it as like a double showing of both films, and I didn't really know what to expect going into these movies. We saw the trailer for the second one quite a lot before I went to go see it. We'd seen that trailer quite a lot, and I don't think the trailer does it justice. I think the trailer makes it look kind of like, it makes it look a bit shit, but it's not. It's a bad editing job, or they didn't quite capture the tone of what the movie's like.
They didn't put enough smiles in the trailer.
There weren't nearly enough smiles. Yeah, so the trailer for this movie makes it seem like it's just going to be a big jump scare fest, and it's not. There's a couple in there, but they feel like they're earned, because of how well these movies set up the constant presence of what this thing is, and sort of the sense of dread that it's always there and can turn up at any moment and sort of reveal itself for what it is. And the way these movies kind of progress, especially the second one, are really quite like mindfucky in that they're done to a point where you don't know what's real and what's not. So the whole concept is, with the second one, she's a pop star who, like, funnily enough, had a bad history with like drug use and getting into like bad spots, and it culminated with her being involved in a car crash with her partner at the time, who was like a famous actor. They were like a celebrity couple, and her partner ends up dying in the car crash, because there's always a sort of underlying thing of, is it just the entity fucking with these people, or is it an aspect of their past trauma? Because that's something that's quite unique in this movie. The presence or the entity, whatever you want to call it, it spreads through trauma. What's really cool with these movies is that they're built up slowly enough in that it doesn't feel like you're constantly just like, here's boo, loud noise, scary, be scared. It takes its time to sort of get to know the character and start it off with small things, and then the things she's being terrorized with constantly ramp up throughout the movie. And I love one of the reveals they did in this one. Our main character, she calls like a friend that she's sort of estranged with to come and sort of reconcile with her, because she feels like that's gonna help her through this like awful situation she's in. And then the movie pulls the rug out from under you, like in its final act, by saying actually her friend was never there. It was this entity fucking with her the entire time.
Hey yo.
It's interesting, the idea of like, we've introduced a character but not at the same time. They're not a real character. We faked you. Because that's what these movies are about, is making you question what's real and what's not, and what's going to come next, and how it's all leading up. And it gives you hope that they're going to find a way to deal with this in a way that saves them, and then always ends up hitting you with a gut punch. And the one in this movie is one of my favorite endings to a horror movie I've seen recently, just because of the implication of it. So like I said, this entity spreads through trauma, and what that is usually throughout the movie is it passes from one person to another. If you witness the person that is infected or plagued by this entity kill themselves, then it passes to you, and then the same thing happens to you, and it's like a cycle. And this character, being like an internationally famous pop star, this ending is really, really cool, because it fucks with you the whole time. And the ending, spoilers, this is the spoiler territory. The part we get that's real is the culmination of the entity finally takes her over while she's live on stage on a concert that is not only in front of all these people, but it's being televised. And she kills herself on stage, so it's the implication that every single one of these people can now be affected by this creature. Yeah, it's not super deep in terms of like messaging or any point that's going to get. It's kind of the one thing it has is that idea of like unresolved trauma, and how it can affect our behaviors, and how it'll eventually eat you alive and sort of end in the worst outcome if left unchecked. And also, these movies have such a cool design. It's a choice where I'm a bit iffy with it, but the design saves it, in that there is a physical manifestation of whatever this entity is that's affecting it. Because for the most part, throughout the films, whenever they are being haunted by it, it just appears as a person. Probably it could be someone that they know, or it could be a complete stranger, but it's just a person smiling at them. Until you see it at the end, when they finally become possessed and taken over by it. This thing has a really cool design. It's like nothing I've seen before. Like, imagine like a big fucking maggot body with spindly like spider legs, but the spider legs have got hands on. And it's got a mouth inside of a mouth, and the whole thing is like skinless. The best as I can describe it. It's a really, really cool design, and it sort of acts as the final manifestation. So it's suggesting that this thing is like a physical thing, because both our main characters from the first and second movie see it in that same form. That's kind of like its true form, I guess. Yeah, just it's a haunted ride. It's a spooky ride for the most part. I wouldn't say like overly scary, but I think a lot of the violence in it, like the gore, is pretty good. There's a lot more violent. I think the trailers make it seem like it's going to be more like a supernatural thing, but it's quite a bit more violent than you'd imagine. But it has a nice blend. It has a nice blend of the two, and it's a fun ride. And that's why it gets a recommend. If you're looking for something to watch like during spooky, I know spooky season's over now, but I actually say that November is also spooky season. We're carrying it on for another month.
Fuck it.
We're carrying it on for another month.
That's
the
doing
new
another one
tradition.
this year.
Because nothing else happens in November of any import.
Not over here.
No.
In America, you lot have got Thanksgiving. Here in the UK, we've got fuck all till Christmas
bonfire
now.
night. That's it. Next up, Strange Darling. That's you. That's a way to describe you. Another recommend from me. Woo! This is a good one.
We're on a roll, people. We're on a roll.
First thing. I don't know if it's like a recent thing. There's been a lot of chapter headings I've seen in films.
Yeah, people are starting to treat
the
films like books.
It's the big new thing.
Let's keep those separate.
And I was like, it was this. Never Let Go had chapter headings.
Megalopolis did it.
I think Megalopolis did it. I feel like something else I watched had it.
Yeah, I feel like something else did.
There's been a lot of chapter headings.
It's just it's kind of a weird. It's almost pretentious. I feel like, isn't it?
In a way, yeah. I'm fine with them having it in this one because of the reason that this story is not told chronologically.
Oh, okay.
So it helps you keep track of like when each thing happens. So this movie, it seems a weird choice of like, because this whole movie is kind of like a cat and mouse story. None of the characters really have names. It's pretty much just like the woman and I think the guy is referred to as like the demon or something. It's a cat and mouse story where it starts off, you're given very little context. This woman is on the road out in the middle of nowhere trying to run away from this guy who's pursuing her, and she ends up finding a house and like looking for help, and that's kind of where we end. And it goes back to the beginning of when these two first meet, and this has a very cool like flip and twist the story on its head as it progresses. So for the most part during this film, you believe it's a story where this guy is a serial killer and he's hunting this woman, and then we get the context of when we meet, and they start off with this romantic relationship and they're both involved with each other. And it's a very new age kind of relationship. There's a lot of kinky stuff going on there, a lot of stuff involving like bondage and safe words and various other behind closed doors shenanigans. And the way this movie's clever, where it flips the story and it makes sense why it was told non-chronologically. It gives you the context of thinking this woman is being hunted, but then it flips the script, and as the story plays out and we get more context, we find out actually this woman was the serial killer all along. And the reason the guy's chasing her is it turns out he's a police officer. So they had this relationship. She was going to end up killing him, but ended up being a bit of a botched job. And then the pursuit happens. And I just think it's a clever bit of storytelling where you take a story that would have been very straightforward if you played it from start to finish. But if you chop it up and then sort of rearrange it, do this bit, then this bit, then this bit, it's a story that sets expectations and then flips them, and it's just a cool bit of filmmaking. I think and it's the one thing where I think chapter headings are fine because it helps me keep track. If they hadn't had them, movie would have been all over the fucking place. It wouldn't have made sense because you would be like, when's this happening? What the fuck? It's not a lot to like dive into outside of its little twists and turns. It's quite a simple story, but it's told very effectively. The performances, I think, again, it's the one where they're quite sort of not particularly big names in it, but they put in like a shift with this and it carries the movie. And just like the ending shot of this is our killer in a car, and the final shot sort of lingers on her in the passenger seat, and the mix of kind of it's a very weird mix of like dread of the fact that they're finally getting caught, or the concept that they're finally dying. She does have a little bit where she says about how it's weird how she's a serial killer, but like one thing she fears most is dying. There's a mix of that, and then also sort of admiration of the fact that it's like, wow, like finally someone's kind of caught onto my shit and has like turned the tables on me. It's something we don't see too much, I don't think, is just the final shot with the credits rolling being like just focusing on one person. It reminded me a lot of Pearl. Pearl ends on a very similar kind of shot, but sometimes just focusing on a character's facial expressions and their performance, like nothing more needs to be said. They carry like the end of the movie and the conclusion just with their performance. Just put a bit more faith in your actors, guys.
Just let them act.
Just let them act. It's in the name.
We don't need all the gimmicks.
It's in the name. And then they put up the title card and it says, the Beatles went on to record the White Album.
Of course, yeah.
John Lennon, I think, did like a backflip with like a standing. I think that was his goal. He learned how to do like a standing backflip.
I don't remember that.
Ringo.
I feel like I remember that.
Ringo owns all the railways or something.
No, I think you got that a bit wrong. Yeah.
No, like I think he like purchased and owns like all the railways, and like any money you spend on train tickets goes to him. In this country, at least.
Bastard.
Star.
Next up, A Real Pain. This film makes me feel like a real proper film reviewer, because I managed to catch a preview of this.
Oh.
I don't think it's technically out yet over here, so that was fun, and it's definitely a recommend. We're back again.
We're back.
We're
baby.
on such a roll. Woo woo woo. Just saying we're back for everything. Recommend.
Film is back.
We are so back. Film is back.
Remember that bit in the middle where we weren't recommending things? The film was dead.
It was so dead. It was so overcooked.
Film is back.
Cooked.
Film is back.
Tell you what, we are so back.
Film was washed. Film is back.
Film fell off. Film's so back. Yeah, absolutely recommend. This film is excellent. Absolutely excellent. Directed by Jesse Eisenberg and starring the man himself alongside Kieran Culkin as the co-lead roles here. They play cousins who go on a Holocaust tour in Poland post their grandma's death to find out a bit more about where she came from, sort of what their family has been through. It's a comedy, but it manages to balance that with obviously some very dark content.
Yeah.
There's been quite a few Holocaust-based films this year, hasn't there, actually? I feel like I've talked about it a lot.
It's so back.
It's so back. It's so back. Oh, no.
He's lost it.
I fucking lost it. We've been talking about films
17 films
so fucking long.
Lost it.
But yeah, it manages to balance the humour so well. Kieran Culkin is sort of plays a bit more of a larger than life character. Jesse Eisenberg is kind of the straight man, the bit more reserved, And we have this little cast of characters with the tour group they're on. That's great. You get to sort of know each one of them, and as they sort of go through this tour, emotions start to rise up and things start to come into perspective, and they sort of learn about each other and they learn about themselves along the way. And it's just it's such a great progression, and the direction from Jesse Eisenberg here is very sort of natural. It's very grounded. It's nothing too flashy. It looks like they're going to these real locations and they really filmed there, and the importance of it comes through very well. The delicate talking points and the important history of all this stuff is dealt with incredibly tactfully here. And yeah, they both give just brilliant performances as these two sort of polar opposite cousins that have grown up together and have sort of a love-hate thing going on. They annoy the shit out of each other, but they love each other because they're family, and they really care for each other. And yeah, so it's one of those films. It's about brotherly love, or I guess cousinly love. That's I'm not sure about that one.
That's a real Alabama moment right there.
That's a category on Pornhub, I think. And yeah, it's just it's a really, really beautiful film, and I had a lovely time watching it. I laughed, I cried, I did all of that. Well done, Mr. Eisenberg, on a successful directorial feature.
Although you cast yourself in the lead, you egotistic piece of shit.
Bit narcissistic, that.
You piece of shit.
No, you shouldn't have done that.
No, you're a piece of shit.
I know this was kind of a story you wanted to tell, and you wanted to do it the right way and through yourself, but no.
How is it that it takes you having to direct a movie for you to get any work, mate? You invented Facebook.
Mate, you invented Facebook.
You invented Facebook. Have you not got enough money as it is?
And you're a world-class magician.
And you survived a zombie apocalypse like twice.
You've got all this stuff under your belt, and you're doing this.
You should be doing this.
Unbelievable, Jeff. Jeffy Eisenberg. We're going fucking loopy. We're almost there.
We're almost there. We're almost there. We're almost there. I promise. Next up, Salem's Lot.
As mentioned by Eminem in Lose Yourself.
A lot of shit. Oh, wait, here's a better one. This movie sucks.
So I'm guessing it's not a recommend from you.
No, this is not a recommend.
The film is so cooked.
This film is fucking boring. Which is impressive for a movie about vampires. The whole premise of this should rest upon the fact that, you know, this town is slowly being taken over by vampires, as the characters that we know, that we've been introduced to, that we love, are slowly succumbing and being taken over and becoming part of the vampiric horde. That's what this movie should be. Instead, it's just, here's a bunch of characters, each one is fodder to eventually add to the vampire army. You're not going to care about any of them, so we can pick and choose whichever ones we want to survive, I guess, because they're all the same anyway. You know?
Sorry, I was taking a mid-review sip break.
I just need my throat. I'm so parched. I need blood to sustain me. Yes, Stephen King adaptations, ever since It and It Chapter 2, not been so good. He's one of those, I think he is the most adapted author of all time. I think he has that record. And just quite a lot of it is just like kind of shit. Is slop.
Because a lot of his, like, he's a great writer, don't get me wrong, but he puts out a fuck ton of books. And a lot of them are like quite pulpy, and like a lot of them are just very that vibe.
I think maybe his work just doesn't translate to screen.
I think a lot of his stuff is
there's a lot of odd, bizarre concepts in there
than you can even do.
Yeah,
there's plenty of it that's straightforward horror, but there's a lot of his big ones that are a lot weirder than people think.
Like It has a bunch of shit in it that did not make it into the films because of how bizarre it is. There's like a weird like cosmic space turtle in there.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of weird stuff in his writing, which when you then condense it down and cut a lot of it out, doesn't translate super well to the films. I think It works super well because in its sort of base form, it's just a movie about these group of kids in a small town who are being terrorized by a shape-shifting like evil presence, and you can easily make that fun.
It still works.
And just like with Salem's Lot, you could have easily made this work and make it good if the characters had been written in a way that makes us care about them, so that each time like one of them becomes a vampire and is now one of them, like it hits harder because you're like, oh, I like that character, now they're gone. But instead it's just each character is kind of just characterized by their job. It's like, here's the writer, here's the priest, here's the teacher. That's the only way I can remember any of the people in this.
Here's Salem, here's his lot.
That's Salem's lot. There are a lot of vampires. That's his lot.
A lot of vampires.
I don't want you hanging out with Salem's lot.
Have you been hanging out with Salem's lot over there?
Yeah, I don't want you hanging out. Come back home. I don't want you hanging out with them.
I'm not
don't want you hanging out.
No, that is it.
Oh, did you just put an Easter egg in your film? Yeah, they do the thing as well where the main character is a writer, and they do the whole thing of people making fun of like the writing profession because it's like it's a little jab about how Stephen King's works have been received at times, which was charming when they did it in It. It felt more mean-spirited in this. Like they're really just criticizing the writing profession as a whole.
Kind of ironic.
It's like that. No, that's fucking. You can't make money doing that. You can't make money. Fuck you. Not even Euron Greyjoy himself could have saved this movie. He's just a bland villain. Also, there's another villain in it which just looks like Nosferatu in its design. Bad, boring time all round. Hopefully, the monkey's better.
That's a Stephen King short, isn't it? Yeah.
Hopefully, when that comes out, that's better. But it's not been a super good run for modern Stephen King adaptations. Last up, VHS Beyond. And we can end positively because this one's a recommend from me.
Hooray!
I just feel bad for you because people will see how many fucking directors you had to type out for this movie.
Oh, no.
Because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
They came together.
Yeah.
Beatles reference.
They did.
Talk about the Beatles.
He's tying it all
back together.
Tying it all back. Yeah, fans of this series will realise why there's a lot of directors. It's because this is an anthology horror movie, which sort of came back a few years ago. I think they did 3 movies before, and the third one ended up not being received so well, not being particularly good. Went stagnant for a while, and then Shudder started up, and they picked up the franchise, and now we're sort of getting one. Every Halloween, it seems to be a new Halloween tradition that Shudder will release a new VHS movie. I guess because it seems like they're quite easy to make, because I guess you're essentially getting other people to make a movie and then just stitching it together. So I had to make some notes. Just so I know what each segment is called. So first you got the wraparound segment called Abduction, and the wraparound segment is kind of the one they cut back and forth between each other segment. This one's really good. It's sort of done in the style of those kind of alien documentary type shows, like Ancient Aliens, like all that kind of shit. And then it doesn't quite hit the horror aspect of it until the end. Kind of a build up towards they're talking about these pieces of evidence they found, which like the most convincing evidence we've got of alien life, and that's the horror segment it ends on. Little appearance here. I don't know if you remember Corridor Digital.
Oh yeah.
They have a little cameo in this movie just to emphasize the realism of this segment, because they get people to react to this footage and like act like they're experts, like analyzing it. And obviously Corridor Digital, known for their sort of digital effects work, and they can analyze this and be like, oh yeah, like this seems convincing to me. I can't see any like evidence of tampering or special effects in this. Just a neat little cameo, I guess. But then we get into the meat. We get into the meat of the movie, which is all the various segments that we jump between. So first is a segment called Stalk.
This is a segment called Timestalker. There's a woman who...
No, this was a bunch of police officers raiding this sort of apartment complex where they've been told this weird cult-like stuff going on. A lot of kidnappings have been happening, and they're sent to this building to investigate. And then the whole thing is filmed like a big like FPS shoot 'em up horror sequence where they go in with these weird alien hybrid creatures which act like zombies, but whatever they're infected with comes from like a crashed asteroid. And we see why it's called Stalk right at the end, with a really cool weird creature design where they go up where they're turning like these kidnapped children into these weird hive creatures. And the first thing is reminiscent of, it's got like a weird bird-like design to it, but it's very distinctly alien. It's one of the stronger segments, not quite my favorite, followed by what is my favorite segment in this movie, called Dream Girl. It starts off with like a Bollywood-style music video, and as it progresses, we find that you're like, oh, what's going on here? Like, they're investigating it, and it's like, it's the idea of this Bollywood star, and like, she's the main focus of this video, and like the character's asking like, well, hold on, this person just kind of came up like out of nowhere and is like a huge international star in like such a short span of time. Like, what's going on here? And it takes, I guess, the term industry plant to a whole new level, because the big reveal is that she's a cyborg.
Oh, I thought you were going to say she's actually a plant.
No, not a plant. Not a plant.
Turns out she's actually a plant.
She was made in a plant.
Oh.
All of these segments pretty much just immediately turn into violence and carnage as soon as the horror reveal happens. This is just my favorite of it. This was the most fun interpretation of it, I think. And the most unique one. I think a lot of them took the alien route. So for them to kind of do like the cyborg kind of an alien thing, just made it stand out that bit more. Then you had Live and Let Dive. Great name.
I was about to say, hang on, I recognise this, and then you got to the V, and I was like,
you do it.
Fair enough.
Which is more traditional found footage, I guess, where it's like it's another first person one, but instead of being like a shooter, because I guess the first Stalk had the body cam, and so you could see what their hands are doing in most parts, but this is mostly just handheld camera.
Sorry, I'm thinking about Paul McCartney explodes and fucking dies.
Live and let die.
Anyway, carry on.
So this segment basically starts off with a bunch of friends celebrating a birthday party, and they do it by going like a skydiving experience until the plane crashes into a UFO, and then you get a really cool like skydiving first person sequence where we see like the carnage of like all the wreckage coming down. You see a person falling without their chute, and like their leg's been torn off, so all the blood's like streaming up. And then you get a little glimpse of the alien as it's falling as well, and then once they should have put that in.
I did the Folie for that.
I would have enjoyed that. It was me. It was me just in the booth that said, we don't have any tools, you're just going to have to use your mouth and do what you can. Yeah, once they hit the ground, the surviving people are just being hunted by this alien creature. Very classic horror, done in a short span of time. No nonsense, no fat, straight to the point. Pretty good segment. Then we have Fur Babies, which was directed by the only person I recognised, Justin Long. Justin Long and I think it's Christian Long, his brother.
Oh.
And for anyone who's ever seen the movie Tusk will recognise, I guess, where he got the inspiration for this short. This is about a group of animal activists who go to visit this person who's does like some little like internet videos about like they do like a doggy daycare kind of thing. And then when they get there, the woman is incredibly creepy. Gives off vibes of like Kathy Bates in Misery.
Oh yeah.
Very similar kind of performance here. And the big twist is that at this place, at her house, she's got a weird underground lab where she's creating human-dog hybrids. So people who've seen Tusk will know where that's come from,
Yeah. You know, the connection between a dog and a human is just so profound.
It's just so profound. We really need to emphasize that by putting them together, but like physically. But,
really,
like physically
actually together.
actually just
together.
Be one body.
Tell you what, this VHS one's really wrapping everything up perfectly.
Really wrapping everything up together.
Really bringing in all the themes of today's episode.
Yeah, we got the robots. We got the
dogs, the stalking.
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney.
The Beatles.
Can't believe it.
And then the last segment is called Stowaway. And
in A Real Pain, Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin stowed away on a train
to get to where they
they needed to go.
And then, of course, they followed a similar journey of them sort of documenting themselves, searching for this UFO and doing interviews about an area where it had been seen. And then eventually they go onto the UFO, and any injury that they take is kind of instantly healed by these weird, like, nanobot kind of things. Interesting take on it, though, is that the UFO is, like, abducted several creatures, but they don't have any, like, humans on there. So anytime this woman picks up an injury and it heals her, it's healing her using animal DNA. So she's constantly mutating. And the way this ends is that the ship ends up like jumping to light speed, and she gets absolutely like obliterated by the impact. And then when we see her get pieced back together, it's all like different animal pieces until she's like this gross, unrecognizable kind of monster.
And that's the substance. Oh wait, no, that was last time.
No.
We're really wrapping up the whole series.
Up the whole everything, the whole year. The VHS movies that I always kind of enjoy, even like the worst ones, the ones that aren't quite as good. I still enjoy them because it's a nice palate cleanse of it's just short stories. I don't think there's enough anthology movies out there. I think horror's probably the one where I've seen like a few, but I don't know if like any other genre has really done like the anthology film. It seems like a very
Love Actually is
very
sort
tailored.
Of
Yeah, in a way. Yeah, it's kind
mind.
of it's a series of stories. Yeah,
we had Kinds of Kindness this year. But again, that sort of leaned into a bit of horror.
Yeah,
a couple of those. I mean, horror is just an easy short story format. I feel like it's easy to just do a short horror
it's
thing.
tailor made for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, anthology. I like it. Anthology. Bring it back. Bring it back, people.
Why are we not?
I guess it lends itself to TV more than films, like Black Mirror.
Like sci-fi. I think
sci-fi's a good one.
Sci-fi and horror are the ones where, well, I'd say sci-fi, fantasy, horror are sort of the big three in terms of they give you the most freedom in terms of like design and world building.
You kind of do anything with the concept.
You can do what you want.
You can have insane characters and stuff.
And that's why anthology works so much, because like you get an array of directors, they're all going to give you something completely different.
Exactly.
But yeah, here's to hoping like it's becoming a regular, proper Halloween tradition. We just keep getting a new VHS movie every October.
So we'll see you next year.
Stack them up. Stack them up.
Stack them.
Fucking stack them, boys!
Stack them, sack them, robots.
Oh. I think that's killed him.
It's killed him. That's the final blow. Well, we've done it, folks. We've made it through the monthly thing, what we watched in October. Special bumper edition episode today.
Yeah, what a stacked month it's been.
Yeah. I mean, we just love watching films, man. We love watching films.
We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't love watching films.
Exactly. And we're doing a little bonus monthly thing this month. We're going to talk about the TV shows we watched, because we couldn't possibly squeeze them into this.
Yeah, I don't think it would quite... You'd be sat there for fucking 17 hours.
So keep a lookout for that. I'll link that up here or whatever, or down in the description for when that's out, and you can hear about what TV shows we watched this month. There's some good ones.
Some good ones.
So have a check out of that. Thank you for watching HAZMAT, reviewing every film they saw in October 2024.
If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see us do more stuff like this in the future, you can support the channel by leaving a like or a comment. You can hit the subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you'll be alerted to all our more recent uploads. And as always, all of our socials will be listed down in the description.
And join us next time, where I smoke so many cigarettes it actually becomes uncool.
And I'm just gonna, I think, take me brain out and put it in a robot. I think the robots have it. I think they have...
It's time.
It's the month of the robot.
It's time.
In fact, might even be the year of the robot. I think it's time. Embrace the future. Embrace modernity. We'll all be robots.
See you next month.
Peter Crouch.
We brought it back around to Peter Crouch. We brought it back around.
Brought it back around.